Your grandmother did not measure anything when she made her meatballs. She had been doing it long enough that her hands knew. A pound of beef from the butcher on the corner, egg, breadcrumbs, a handful of herbs. The meat was deep red. It smelled like iron and fat, the way raw beef is supposed to smell. She would roll each one between her palms, drop them into the pan, and the sizzle that came off that cast iron was something you could hear from the next room. You have been chasing that smell your whole life. You buy ground beef from the grocery store every week. You brown it for tacos, shape it into patties, build the same meatballs she used to make from memory. And somewhere in the back of your mind, you have always known the beef tasted different, thinner somehow, less of itself. But you told yourself it was the pan, or the recipe, or that memory always makes things taste better than they were. It was not the pan. It was not the recipe. Independent laboratory analysis and federal labeling investigations into 15 of America's most purchased ground beef brands found that what most Americans are cooking with is not what their grandmothers bought from that butcher on the corner. Some of it is not even what the label says it is. We are going through all 15 and finishing with the 8 brands that are still selling you exactly what they say they are. Stay with this all the way through, because the brand at number 1 on the avoid list is the one sitting in the most American refrigerators right now. And what independent testing found inside it is the most important thing on this list. Before we get into the brands, you need to understand the single most important fact about ground beef labeling in America, because the food industry has spent 30 years making sure you do not. Under the United States Code of Federal Regulations, a product labeled simply as ground beef cannot legally contain any additives. No water, no phosphates, no binders, no extenders, no soy protein, nothing but beef from the carcass of the animal. That is the law. What that law does not regulate is what happens when a company switches the name. The moment a product is called a beef patty instead of ground beef, every one of those restrictions disappears. Soy protein isolate, textured vegetable protein, carrageenan, modified food starch, water, sodium phosphate, natural flavors, hydrolyzed soy protein, all of it becomes legal. All of it can be blended into the product, and none of it has to appear on the front of the package. The package still shows a picture of a juicy beef patty on a grill. The product name change is doing everything the law allows to let a company charge you for beef while delivering something meaningfully different. Several brands on this list use exactly that mechanism. Now you know how to spot it. Number 15. Flanders Homestyle Beef Patties. The word homestyle is doing significant work on this label. It implies something made close to the way you would make it yourself. Simple and honest, with familiar ingredients. Open the package, and the reality announces itself before you even read the label. The seasoning smell hits immediately, and it is overpowering in the way that processed meat seasonings are. Designed to cover rather than complement, the ingredient panel explains why. These patties contain beef heart, alongside conventional trim, soy flour, dextrose, and a spice blend that the company declines to itemize beyond the word flavoring. Soy flour is a cheap extender that pads the weight of the product and reduces the cost per unit. Dextrose is a sugar added to promote browning and influence flavor, not because beef needs sugar to be good. Independent taste testing found the texture of these patties to be more similar to a structured formed product than to ground beef, meaning the meat was processed and shaped under pressure, rather than simply ground and portioned. They cook up identically from edge to center, with no variation, which is the hallmark of a mechanically formed product, rather than naturally ground meat. If a patty looks exactly the same at every point across its surface, before it even touches a pan, it was manufactured that way. Real ground beef does not behave that way because real ground beef is not engineered to be uniform. Number 14. Market Side Beef Patties. Market Side is Walmart's everyday grocery house brand. Not the budget option, not the premium private label. The middle of the aisle one. The one that feels like a reasonable choice when you want something convenient without paying extra. The product is labeled beef patties, not ground beef. That single word distinction is the entire story. The ingredient panel includes water, sodium phosphate, and natural flavors, in addition to beef. Sodium phosphate is a moisture retention additive that allows more water to be held inside the meat, which increases the weight of the product and reduces the cost per pound of actual beef content. Natural flavors is a designation that covers dozens of possible additive compounds, none of which have to be named individually. For a product selling on the strength of the Walmart name and a picture of a grill on the packaging, the gap between the front label impression and the ingredient panel reality is wide enough to matter. Walmart generated over $700 billion in revenue in its most recent fiscal year. The sourcing decision that put sodium phosphate and natural flavors in its everyday beef patties was not a financial necessity. It was a margin calculation. Number 13. Tyson ground beef patties. Tyson is one of the 4 corporations that together process approximately 85% of all cattle in the United States. The others are JBS, Cargill, and National Beef. When 4 companies control that proportion of any food supply, the incentives driving their sourcing decisions are not the same incentives that would drive a butcher who knows his customers by name. Tyson's frozen beef patty line includes products that list water, modified food starch, and sodium phosphate alongside beef on the ingredient panel. Modified food starch is a processed thickener that improves the water-holding capacity of the meat, meaning the patty retains more added water through cooking and loses less weight in the pan. The consumer pays for that water at beef prices. Tyson does not publish the sourcing origins of the beef used in its commodity frozen patty lines, meaning you cannot verify whether the trim used to produce the product came from domestic cattle or from international processing facilities, where oversight standards differ from those applied in USDA-inspected domestic plants. Number 12. Jimmy Dean beef sausage patties. Jimmy Dean built its brand on the image of a working American breakfast. The founder was a country music singer from Texas who understood that the name and the story were as powerful as the product itself. That story is now owned by Tyson Foods, which acquired the Jimmy Dean brand. The beef sausage patties include pork alongside beef, which is disclosed on the label. What the front of the package does not lead with is the presence of corn syrup, which is listed in the ingredient panel. Corn syrup in a beef product is not a flavor enhancer in the way a spice is a flavor enhancer. It is a binder and browning agent that also influences palatability in ways that make the product taste richer and more appealing than the meat quality alone would produce. It also means you are getting sugar in a product whose front label gives no indication that sugar is present. For a parent making breakfast for a child, the Jimmy Dean package communicates protein and sustenance. The corn syrup in the ingredient panel communicates something the front of the box was not designed to tell you. Number 11. Ballpark flame grilled patties. Ballpark is also owned by Tyson. The flame grilled designation is a processing description, not a cooking method you should imagine in the conventional sense. These patties are pre-cooked at the manufacturing facility using a high-heat belt grill process that applies grill marks and partially cooks the meat before it is frozen and packaged. The ingredient panel on Ballpark flame grilled patties includes natural smoke flavor, caramel color, and sodium phosphate in addition to beef. Natural smoke flavor is a manufactured liquid smoke additive, not the result of exposure to actual wood smoke. Caramel color is used to deepen the appearance of the grill marks and produce a visual that implies outdoor cooking, without the product having been near an outdoor cooking surface. The packaging shows fire. The product contains flame flavor applied through a liquid additive and color adjusted with caramel coloring. The Federal Code of Regulations allows all of this. Nothing about it is illegal. It is legal specifically because the product is called patties, not ground beef. Number 10. Oscar Mayer beef bologna. Oscar Mayer is owned by Kraft Heinz. Bologna is not ground beef in the conventional sense, and it does not claim to be. But it belongs on this list because tens of millions of American families use it as a protein source for children every single week. It is sold in the meat case next to ground beef, and the ingredient panel tells a story that most parents standing in that aisle have never read carefully. Oscar Mayer beef bologna contains mechanically separated chicken, which appears in the ingredient list ahead of beef by weight in certain product varieties. Mechanically separated chicken is produced by forcing the entire carcass, bones included, through a high-pressure sieve that strips every remaining particle of tissue from the skeleton. The resulting paste is a processed protein slurry with a fundamentally different nutritional and structural profile than cut or ground meat. It is legal to use in processed meat products. It is required to be disclosed on the label. It is not required to be disclosed on the front of the package next to the word beef. The corn syrup solids in the ingredient panel contribute sweetness that makes the product more palatable to children, which is precisely why children ask for it by name. Number 9. Kroger ground beef, 73.27. Kroger is the largest traditional supermarket chain in America by revenue. Their store brand ground beef runs through a supply chain that is primarily sourced from JBS and Tyson subsidiaries, according to sourcing reporting. JBS is a Brazilian-owned corporation that, as of 2025, controls a significant share of American beef processing. In 2018, JBS Tolleson recalled over 12 million pounds of ground beef due to Salmonella Newport contamination. That recall covered products that had been packaged and shipped to retail locations nationwide over a period of more than 6 weeks before the contamination was identified. The Kroger 7327 ground beef label states, "ground beef," and lists no additives, which means it is legally compliant with federal standards. The concern is not the label. The concern is the supply chain behind the label. When your ground beef originates from one of 2 or 3 massive processing facilities handling cattle from hundreds of different source ranches, commingled and processed in bulk, the traceability from the animal to the package does not exist. A contamination event at a single JBS or Tyson facility can affect millions of pounds of product moving through dozens of retail brands simultaneously. The Kroger label gives you no information about which facility produced it. Number 8. Walmart Great Value Ground Beef. Great Value is Walmart's budget house brand for ground beef sold in tube rolls and tray packages. The product is labeled ground beef, and the ingredient panel states beef, which means it meets federal standards and contains no disclosed additives. The issue is what the federal standard does not tell you. Walmart does not own processing facilities. Walmart does not grind beef. Walmart holds supply contracts with large-scale processors, and those contracts are awarded on price. The processor producing Great Value ground beef this month may not be the processor producing it next month. The contract rotates. When it rotates, the sourcing changes, the facility changes, and the traceability of the animal behind the product resets entirely. The label stays the same. The beef inside can come from a completely different supply chain, with zero visible indication to the person who picks it up. In 2021, when the JBS Greeley, Colorado facility was shut down by a ransomware cyber attack, American ground beef supply dropped noticeably within days. That single event exposed how concentrated and fragile a supply chain that roots through a handful of processing giants actually is. Great Value beef moves through that same concentration. Number 7. Sam's Club Members Mark ground beef. Members Mark is Sam's Club's house brand, a subsidiary of Walmart. The ground beef is sold in large bulk packages designed for families and households that cook in volume. The product is labeled ground beef and lists beef as the only ingredient, meeting federal labeling requirements. What Sam's Club does not publish is the list of facilities producing Members Mark beef, or the ranches supplying the cattle. Large format club store ground beef, sold in volumes that require consistent high volume supply, almost by definition, routes through major industrial processing networks. The cattle behind a 10-pound tube of club store ground beef may have originated on dozens of different ranches in multiple states or countries. USDA country of origin labeling for beef was weakened significantly in 2015 when Congress, responding to a World Trade Organization ruling, repealed the requirement that beef carry country of origin labels. American consumers buying ground beef today have no federally mandated right to know whether the cattle were raised in the United States or imported from Canada, Mexico, Australia, or Brazil for processing on American soil. Number 6. Aldi store brand beef patties. Aldi operates on a business model built around sourcing at the absolute lowest viable cost and passing a portion of that savings to the consumer. This produces genuinely good value across many product categories. In the beef category, the economics of Aldi's sourcing model create predictable outcomes. Aldi does not publish its beef suppliers. The store brand beef patties move through supply contracts awarded to whoever can provide product at the required price point and volume. Independent taste comparisons have consistently found Aldi ground beef patties to have a thin, dense, pressed texture that reflects mechanical forming rather than simple portioning of ground meat. Mechanically formed patties are not a legal violation. They are a processing choice that produces a lower-cost product by allowing trim of variable quality and composition to be processed, blended, and shaped under pressure into a uniform form. The result looks like a patty. It cooks like a patty. The animal it came from, the facility that processed it, and the hands that decided what went into that blend are not disclosed anywhere on the package. Number 5. 8020 Cargill ground beef. Cargill is one of the 4 dominant beef processors in America, and the largest privately held corporation in the United States. In May 2024, Cargill Meat Solutions recalled approximately 16,243 pounds of raw ground beef products from its Hazleton, Pennsylvania facility, due to possible E. coli 0157.H7 contamination. The recall covered products labeled all natural lean ground beef and all natural Angus premium ground beef. Cargill also produces what it calls finely textured beef, which is a product distinct from the lean finely textured beef produced by Beef Products Incorporated, but operates on a similar mechanical principle. Finely textured beef involves processing beef trimmings through centrifuge separation to remove fat, producing a paste that is then blended into ground beef to adjust the fat percentage. Cargill states that its FTB product is used in its ground beef blends. The USDA has determined that products containing finely textured beef may be labeled as ground beef without separately identifying the FTB component. When you buy 80/20 Cargill ground beef from a retailer that does not specify its source, finely textured beef may be part of the blend inside the package, and the label will not tell you. Number 4. JBS, USA ground beef. JBS is a Brazilian corporation that is the largest beef processor in the world and the second largest in the United States. As of 2025, JBS, along with Tyson, Cargill, and National Beef, processes approximately 85% of American cattle. JBS has accumulated a federal recall history that is among the most extensive of any processor in the American beef supply. Beyond the 2018 Salmonella Newport contamination that produced one of the largest ground beef recalls in American history at over 12 million pounds, JBS facilities have issued recalls for foreign matter contamination, including hard plastic pieces, across multiple years and multiple facilities. The foreign matter recall in 2018 from the Lenoir, North Carolina facility covered approximately 35,464 pounds of product, including ground beef, packaged under the Kroger label. A separate recall from the Plainwell, Michigan facility in 2019 covered approximately 43,292 pounds of ground beef, containing plastic contamination sold under the Meyer label. JBS beef moves through retail under dozens of brand names, including store brands that carry no JBS identification. The consumer standing in a grocery aisle has no reliable mechanism to know which products were processed at JBS facilities, unless a recall makes that information public. Number 3. National Beef Packing Company ground beef. National Beef is the 4th member of the Big Four and is owned by Marfrig Global Foods, a Brazilian meatpacking conglomerate. Like JBS, the foreign ownership of 2 of the 4 dominant American beef processors means that the sourcing decisions, supply chain standards, and cost optimization logic governing the beef most Americans eat are made by corporations whose primary accountability is to shareholders in Brazil, not to consumers in the United States. National Beef does not sell much directly to individual consumers under its own name. It sells primarily to food service operations, fast food chains, and retail brands that package their product under store labels or proprietary brand names. When you buy store-brand ground beef from a mid-size grocery chain that does not disclose its processor, there is a meaningful probability that the beef was processed by National Beef or one of its subsidiaries. The label will not tell you. The retailer may not know for certain which processing facility produced the specific lot you are holding. Number 2. Impossible Burger ground beef style. Impossible Foods positions its product as a direct replacement for ground beef. The product is not beef. It is made from soy, protein concentrate, sunflower oil, coconut oil, methyl cellulose, food starch, and a yeast-derived heme molecule called soy leg hemoglobin that produces the appearance and partial flavor profile of beef. This product deserves to be on this list, not because it is fraudulent, but because Impossible Foods markets it in the meat case, in packaging designed to visually mirror ground beef, at prices that match or exceed real beef per pound, and a significant portion of consumers buying it believe they are buying a beef-adjacent product with equivalent nutritional value. Soy leg hemoglobin was approved by the FDA as generally recognized as safe, but that approval was contested by consumer advocacy groups, who argued the long-term safety data on the novel protein was insufficient. Methyl cellulose is a cellulose-derived thickener also used in laxative products. The product contains no animal protein. A parent buying Impossible Burger for a household where they believe they are serving protein equivalent to beef, is working from an assumption the marketing created without the label fully supporting. Number 1. Beyond Beef ground beef style. Beyond Meat operates on the same direct competitor to ground beef positioning as Impossible Foods, and its Beyond Beef product deserves the number 1 position on this list, specifically because of how aggressively and effectively it has been placed in the beef section of American grocery stores across the country. Beyond Beef contains pea protein isolate, expeller-pressed canola oil, refined coconut oil, rice protein, mung bean protein, methyl cellulose, potato starch, natural flavor, yeast extract, salt, potassium chloride, beet juice extract for color, and apple extract. There is no beef in this product. Beyond Meat received a USDA approval to display its product in the fresh meat case, alongside conventional ground beef. The packaging uses red coloring, familiar ground beef typography, and the word beef prominently in the product name. In 2021, Don Lee Farms, a former manufacturing partner of Beyond Meat, filed a lawsuit alleging that Beyond Meat had misrepresented the safety and quality of its products and had improperly handled food safety audits. Beyond Meat settled litigation from investors in 2024 related to claims that the company had misled shareholders about the speed of its revenue recovery. Beyond Beef costs more per pound than conventional 80/20 ground beef at the same retailer. The consumer paying that premium in the belief they are getting a nutritionally equivalent or superior protein source is making that decision based on marketing, not on a label that accurately communicates what is inside. The nutrition profile of pea protein and meat protein are not identical. The products are fundamentally different. The packaging in the fresh meat case is designed to obscure that difference, not clarify it. Now here are the 8 that are actually selling you what they say they are. Best option number 8. Publix store brand ground beef. Publix made a public commitment that it has never allowed lean, finely textured beef in its ground beef, and has maintained that position across multiple years of industry pressure to reduce costs. Their statement, issued in response to the 2012 pink slime controversy and maintained since, reads simply that Publix ground beef is 100% ground beef, with no LFTB. Publix sources its beef and employs meat cutters in a significant number of store locations, rather than relying entirely on pre-packaged, centralized product. If you are in a Publix market, the ground beef in the case is among the most straightforwardly labeled products in this category at a national grocery chain. Best option number 7. H-E-B store brand ground beef. H-E-B is a Texas-based grocery chain that has committed publicly that all ground beef sold under the H-E-B label is 100% pure, with no additives. H-E-B is privately owned and operates primarily in Texas. Like Publix, their public commitment predates and postdates the major industry pink slime controversy, and has not been walked back. H-E-B also has a developed supply chain transparency program for Texas-sourced beef under its Texas Beef brand, which traces the cattle to specific ranching operations in the state. Best option number 6. Costco Kirkland Signature Ground Beef. Costco publicly committed to not using pink slime in its ground beef, and the company's vice president of quality assurance stated on record that he did not know how to explain ammonia-treated trim to customers, and chose not to use it for exactly that reason. Costco's Kirkland Signature Ground Beef is labeled ground beef with beef as the only ingredient, and the company has maintained its pink slime-free position since the 2012 controversy. As of June 2026, Costco's Kirkland Signature 91% lean ground beef 5-packs are available in stores. Buying in larger quantities from Costco gives you a cleaner supply chain at a price point that is competitive with the brands on the avoid list. Best option number 5, Laura's Lean Beef. Laura's Lean sources from American family farms and publishes its sourcing standards publicly. The cattle are never given antibiotics or added hormones. The beef is minimally processed, and the product is labeled ground beef with beef as the only ingredient. Laura's Lean is available at Whole Foods, Kroger, and other major retailers, and has been independently verified for its no hormone, no antibiotic claim through third-party certification. For a brand available in a standard grocery store at a price point that does not require a subscription or specialty retailer, Laura's Lean is the most accessible step up from industrial commodity beef on this list. Best option number 4, Nature's Rancher Ground Beef. Nature's Rancher is USDA certified organic, which means the cattle were raised without antibiotics, without synthetic growth hormones, and on feed grown without synthetic pesticides. The organic certification also prohibits the use of ammonia-treated lean, finely textured beef in the product. Nature's Rancher publishes that its beef comes from family farm operations, and the product is labeled ground beef with no additives, gluten-free certified and available at Whole Foods. For a parent buying ground beef specifically to serve to children and wanting a verifiable clean certification rather than a brand promise, the USDA organic seal on Nature's Rancher ground beef covers the supply chain inputs that the conventional labels do not. Best option number 3. U.S. Wellness Meats, grass-fed ground beef. U.S. Wellness Meats was founded in 2000 in Monticello, Missouri, by cattle farmers who built the company as a direct rejection of big business cattle raising practices. Their ground beef comes from 100% grass-fed and grass-finished cattle, raised on pasture by small family farms, using regenerative agriculture. No antibiotics, no growth hormones, no GMO feed. They publish the sourcing model, the farms they work with, and the nutritional difference between grass-fed and grain-fed beef. Independent nutritional analysis finds grass-fed beef from cattle raised entirely on pasture contains higher concentrations of omega-3 fatty acids and conjugated linoleic acid than conventional grain-finished beef. U.S. Wellness Meats ships directly to the consumer and is not available through conventional grocery distribution. The price reflects the real cost of the supply chain they have built. What you are paying for is the beef your grandmother's butcher would have recognized without hesitation. Best option number 2. ButcherBox grass-fed ground beef. ButcherBox is a subscription beef delivery service that sources 100% grass-fed and grass-finished ground beef from small family farms. The product ships frozen and vacuum-sealed directly to your door. ButcherBox has been independently rated as one of the best overall organic meat delivery services in multiple 2025 and 2026 consumer reviews. The supply chain is documented, the sourcing is published, and the beef is labeled ground beef with one ingredient. ButcherBox's model exists specifically because the conventional grocery supply chain makes it almost impossible for a consumer to verify what is behind a label without a direct relationship to a producer. ButcherBox builds that relationship at scale and charges accordingly. For families who cook ground beef multiple times per week and want to stop guessing about what is inside the package, the subscription model makes the cleanest option a consistent automatic choice, rather than a decision that has to be made fresh at every grocery trip. Best option number 1, your local independent butcher. This requires no lab analysis, no ingredient panel literacy, and no subscription. Walk in and ask a single question. Where does this beef come from? And is there anything in it besides beef? A butcher who can answer both questions without hesitation is the only beef supply chain in America that has not been designed to make that question difficult to answer. The butcher who knows the rancher, grinds the meat in front of you, and puts it in a paper wrap, has none of the incentive structure that produced every brand on the avoid list. No shareholders to answer to, no procurement contracts to win at the lowest possible price, no industrial volume requirement that forces the sourcing question to become secondary to the cost question. Your grandmother bought her beef from a butcher like this. The meat was red, and it smelled like iron. The meatballs sizzled when they hit the pan, and you could hear it from the next room. That supply chain still exists. It is smaller than it used to be, but it is still there. Finding it is the most straightforward thing you can do with everything this list just told you. The next time you are making her recipe, the beef deserves to be the thing she used. Here is the one test worth running before anything else. Take whatever ground beef you are currently buying and look for the word patties anywhere on the package. If it says beef patties rather than ground beef, the federal protections that prohibit additives do not apply to what is inside that package. One word changed on the label removes every restriction that would require the product to contain nothing but beef. That is not an accident. It is a legal pathway that the food industry has used deliberately and profitably for decades. Flip the package over and read the ingredient panel. If the only ingredient is beef, you are legally holding ground beef. If you see water, sodium phosphate, natural flavors, soy protein, textured vegetable protein, modified food starch, caramel color, or anything else alongside beef, you are holding a beef patty product, operating under none of the restrictions that a ground beef label would require. The price on the front did not change, The contents did. Share this with everyone in your family who buys ground beef every week. They are probably buying one of the brands on this list right now. For the same reason you were. The package looked like beef. Nobody told them to look at the word above the picture.